In a world of ordinary fantasy football podcasts, ordinary guys rise up to bring you extraordinary analysis and entertainment. This is the FLAFFL Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts Kevin Cotillo, Sal Lito, and Stephen Marcus.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today is Sunday, December 11th, and this is the Falafel House Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Cotillo. You can follow me on Twitter as @WallyCentral. I have with me, of course, Mr. Steve Marcus. What's going on, Steve?
Oh, not a whole lot. Just another day of football. I was going to say it was a good day of football, but that would be lying. Can't say that.
That would be lying. It was a tough day out there for a lot of people. You can follow Steve on Twitter as @SidSkeet. I almost introduced you as Sal Lito, but unfortunately, Sal's not here tonight.
Yeah, that would have been incorrect for one, as I am not Sal Lito, and he's not even here. Yeah. Unfortunately, we are going to be missing Sal for another night. So don't stop listening. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. But yes, Sal, I hope you're having fun hanging the star on the tallest of Christmas trees tonight.
Spending good time with the family tonight. Sal has left us, but we will persevere. Steve and I will have a much pleasanter show tonight because Sal's not here. So,
is that a word?
Pleasanter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with it.
All right.
I'm gonna go with it. If you want to follow Sal on Twitter, he is @LitoSal. You can follow all three of us on the Fantasy Life app. I suggest you download the app if you haven't already, but check us out. We're in the Falafel House chat. Steve and I are under the same handles there, @WallyCentral and @SidSkeet, and Sal is @Sal33, so make sure you check us all out. We also, before we get started on these games tonight, want to remind everyone, and you probably have even more after this Sunday, we are celebrating FLAFFL Festivus. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming soon. Yep. And we are looking for more submissions, obviously. You can send your submissions in to falafelhouse.com. Record yourself any amount of time under 1 minute airing your grievances. That's right. Get it all out there. Steve has used his league videos on a regular basis to air his grievances. But for those of you who aren't commissioners posting miserable and depressing league videos every week, you get to do it now. You get to send your audio submission to falafelhouse@gmail.com. 60 seconds or less. We are allowing cursing. I would suggest that you keep it clean. Otherwise, as I mentioned last time, Steve's not a magician. He can't bleep everything. And we'd like to keep our everyone rating, right?
That's right. We got to try to keep it a little clean. So, I mean, if things, I've been there many times this season. Sometimes it's hard to refrain, and if you must do so, then go right ahead. I can take care of it, but, all 30 seconds of just a bleep is probably not going to make it through. So, yes, get your submissions in. We are having fun with the ones we've gotten already, and it is going to be a lot of fun doing the FLAFFL Festivus. Cannot wait for that.
Going to definitely be a lot of fun. We are looking forward to that. Steve, do you have some more gripes going into tonight? Are you filling out your grievance form?
Yeah, I think today, like you said, people are going to have a lot more gripe about after today. Like I said last episode, I've had a season full of travesties and I've used those league videos to tell you guys exactly how I feel about them. So it's going to be there's so much that can go wrong for fantasy football, and so much has gone wrong this week already. So yeah, I don't have anything else for it. I don't have it.
All right. Well, for most of you, this was the first week of the fantasy playoffs. Those of you who haven't entered playoffs yet, I'm not sure what kind of league you're in, but hopefully, maybe you get one more week then, because I think a lot of people had some issues this week. So, Steve, we're going to go through each of the games, and you're going to take us through it.
Absolutely. I actually wish I was in a lot of leagues that playoffs didn't start this week because of how terrible most of my teams did, but Nope, that is not the case. We are going to start in Buffalo. The Steelers go into Buffalo and they win in a snowy game against the Bills. They win 27-20. Score makes it sound like it was a much closer game than it was. Pittsburgh really was in control for most of this one, and that was mostly because of Le'Veon Bell. He was by far the biggest scorer of the week, biggest scorer of the season. He totals 298 scrimmage yards and 3 touchdowns, single-handedly winning many playoff matchups for people this week when there were so many people that did so much to screw you. Antonio Brown, he hauls in 5 catches for 78 yards, but Big Ben, he really sucked. He threw for 220 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. For the Bills, you had Shady McCoy with 108 yards, and he scores a touchdown. And then Sammy Watkins also gets into the end zone and scores for those who risked starting him. So, Kev, what did you take away from this Bills and Steelers game?
I don't think you can start with anything other than Le'Veon Bell is very good at football.
Amazing.
And not only that, but he's very good at running in the snow. I mean,
he is.
He's really, really good at it because I think I'm pretty sure last year he had a game in the snow. Was it last year or I don't know. He's good at running in the snow. Let's just call it what it is. He carried the ball 38 times. That's insane. Obviously, in a game that was fairly close most of the way. Pittsburgh started to pull away a little bit in the third quarter, but then Buffalo came back and he just carried. It's amazing. It's amazing to see what he did. The patience, the vision. And still had some burst, even in the snow. The 236 yards on the ground. He had a 6.2 average. Over 38 carries. That's crazy good. Big Ben definitely sucked in this one. So another stinker for him. It just solidifies that home road split thing, man. He can't seem to get away with it. When he is not at home, it does not go well. And, luckily the Steelers are getting away with it. They won in this game, obviously, because of Le'Veon Bell. But I think you have to worry about that going forward in the playoffs. I'm not sure. I'm trying to pull it up now what their schedule is. But
I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it right now. They play at Cincinnati next week and then home against Baltimore in Week 16.
Yeah, so, next week at Cincinnati is going to – you got to wonder, do you roll Ben out there? It's a good matchup. It's a plus matchup, I think, against Cincinnati. But I don't know. It's something to think about. You're going to have a long week of thinking hard about whether or not to roll Ben out on the road there next week. So that's something I would be thinking about. If you played Tyrod Taylor this week, congratulations to you because he looked pretty good as far as Tyrod Taylor goes. He had over 200 yards passing for a change, threw 2 touchdowns for a change. So that's good stuff, but he didn't rush the ball this time, so I guess it all balances out. Somehow he finds a way to get right in that same area. I don't know how he does it every time. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's not bad. All this talk that was coming into the week about, Tyrod Taylor, whether or not he was going to be around next week, maybe that had a little something to do with it. His concentration was maybe on the next level. But yeah, you're right. If he's got the arm going and he's, racking it up through the air, he just doesn't seem to run it at all and get you that additional rushing production that is usually there, that usually saves him each week when he's not throwing the ball. So definitely odd that he just hovers around that same thing. So what are you going to do with Big Ben next week? Are you going to start him in Cincinnati? Are you going to feel comfortable about that?
It's going to depend on what else you have on your roster. In my mind, I think I'm still starting him. I think he's probably still going to be ranked in the top 12 for me. So for most people, I think you're probably going to trot him out there. I don't know who you would have on your roster that you might start in front of him. It's not like you're going to, like some of the guys that you may have lucked into this year as far as if you draft. Because if you drafted Ben, you drafted him relatively high, which meant you waited on a backup if you even had one. So, in a 12-team league, maybe you have Andy Dalton, but I don't know that I want to put him ahead of Roethlisberger next week. Maybe you have, Colin Kaepernick or RG3, but I don't think I'm trusting those guys in a playoff matchup. So I think you're probably stuck with them, right?
Now, what if you had a Marcus Mariota at Kansas City?
No, I don't think. No, I don't think I could do it. I think I'd still go Big Ben, and
I think I would
take
too.
My chances. It's tough because you're going to be nervous about it, but I think you have to.
Yeah, and I think a few teams have the weapons that he has around him. Plus, Le'Veon Bell with 3 rushing touchdowns today could have very easily been a screen pass that was taken to the house from him. He's got that kind of talent. So I think it was just a combination of things that ended up working against Ben this week. I would probably feel like okay rolling him out next week as well because of the things that you said. All right, anything else from here before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting to note that we heard a lot about Mike Gillislee and how he was going to be stealing the goal line work and yada, yada, yada. He got 2 carries for 34 yards, so he had he got a nice, carry. He had a nice 22-yard run, but just keep that in mind. He's not stealing anything from Shady McCoy. McCoy is still the guy, so no need to worry about that.
Yes, absolutely. Do not panic on Shady McCoy.
And by the way, Gillislee not really flex worthy in my mind. A lot of people are thinking he might be flex worthy because he's getting goal line carries. I think this game kind of shows you that that's probably not the route you want to take unless you're desperate.
Yep, desperation play only. All right, we move on. The Panthers dispose of the San Diego Chargers in one of the saddest games of the day. And by that, of course, I am talking about the injury to one Melvin Gordon, who goes down after only 3 carries for 5 yards, single-handedly losing matchups for many people this week. Hopefully it is not anything serious. They're saying it's a hip right now. He's going in for an MRI on Monday, so we will know more about that going forward through the week. Even with Cam Newton only going 10 for 27 for 160 yards and 1 touchdown to Devin Funchess and 1 turnover, they still get the win, mostly because of their defense this week. Jonathan Stewart scores a short touchdown after Cam was tackled short, and it was good to see Greg Olsen get back on track. He had 4 catches for 87 yards. For San Diego, tough game for them after they lost Melvin Gordon. It looked like their offense was just completely out of whack. It doesn't help that Phillip Rivers kept throwing the ball to Carolina, but he does end up throwing some touchdowns to Dontrell Inman, and he also throws another one to Hunter Henry. But going forward, if Melvin Gordon is out, is Kenneth Farrow somebody that you're going to be able to pick up and trust putting into your lineup? Because Gordon, was in a very important part to many playoff teams' lineups. I know I had him in a lot of places, and I'm very, very sad about this, Kev.
Yeah, I'm sad about it too. It's too bad for a guy who had such a terrific bounce back season. You see him leave the game, and you just feel bad for him. But to answer your question, no, I don't think that Kenneth Farrow is a guy that's going to save you if you were a Melvin Gordon owner that somehow managed to squeak through the playoffs for this round and keep going. I think that he was he was okay. 16 for 55, and it's a 3.4 average. He had a long carry of 11 yards, but he's not what Melvin Gordon is, and I don't think he's going to be used that way. I guess maybe he will because kind of have to. They don't have anyone else, but I don't expect much out of him. We'll put it that way. I would be concerned if that's your contingency plan. So hopefully you have someone else on your roster that you might be able to, plug in there as a flex or move some of your roster around. But I would be concerned if you were depending on Kenneth Farrow.
Well, luckily, I also have Matt Forte. So
we'll get to him later. We'll get to him later.
Interesting.
Yeah,
got it.
We'll talk about him later. I did think it. I think I should point out that if Sal were here tonight, he would be giving me all kinds of hell about Antonio Gates because I made a big case to have him start, and he gets 5 catches for 61 yards, which is an okay day from a tight end standpoint. He did have 9 targets. I will say this: he was targeted in the end zone, Sal. So before you give me all kinds of hell, he was at least targeted in the end zone. They were trying to get him that touchdown. Hunter Henry, of course, gets the catch for the touchdown just to stick it to me, but he only gets two catches for 13 yards on 5 targets with the touchdown. So, you settle it since he's not here, Steve. Would Sal be right to give me crap about that?
No, I don't think so. He got the 5 catches, like you said, and touchdowns are fluky. So, I think that they showed that they're going to try still, and I'm confident in Antonio Gates. I understand what you're saying. I agree with it, and I would feel okay rolling him out there. I'd take the chance on him. Phillip Rivers to Antonio Gates has been a solid connection for many years. I think that it's going to still keep going, but Phillip Rivers has got some issues with the old turnovers, so that's always something that you have to worry about with him. What about Kelvin Benjamin, Kev? What do you do with him? He only has one catch for 11 yards and was actually benched later in the game for what they were saying was poor effort. So what do you do with a guy like him going forward? He's got a good matchup next week with Washington, but are you going to feel safe putting him in your lineup?
Maybe. As a flex, I think you're probably thinking that it might be a good matchup for him, right? I mean, that's pretty much all you can do at this point, I think, is throw him in your flex. And luckily, coming off the injury, he may have slipped in your draft. So hopefully he's not someone you're depending on as like a first round pick, right? I mean, so hopefully, you might have been able to make it through this week with getting 1 for 11 from Kelvin Benjamin. And I think I'd be nervous starting him. He's definitely a guy you want to play your matchups with, right? If, it's a good matchup, but is it worth, is he going to be worth trotting out there over the other guys that you might have? So I don't think he's a must start for sure. I think you want to check your, check your rankings for everyone and see where it ends up.
Yep, I would agree there. I think that being the number one wide receiver on that team, I would have a hard time benching him, but definitely moving him down to the flex would be a possibility. Do you have anything else from this one before we move on?
Lots of people had questions about Cam Newton. A lot of people knocked him down quite a bit. You and I both had him pretty high this week. Obviously, that didn't necessarily pan out. Only throws for 160 and a touchdown in this one with an interception. I think he could have had a touchdown rushing as well, so which would have made the day a little nicer. But I'm still not necessarily worried about Cam Newton. I do think that he's going to turn it around. I do think that he will bounce back. So overall, I think you can still roll him out there, and I don't think he's a guy that's going to fall out of the top 12 for me in most weeks. So.
Yep, definitely. Like I said, with Kelvin Benjamin playing Washington next week, he will be a must start for me. All right, we are going to go and move on. And boy, I feel so bad for Cleveland. They are definitely in danger of not winning a game this year. Remember earlier in the season when Sal would always say, these guys are close, they're in games, they fight hard. All that is gone. They're not doing anything like that anymore. They lose to the Bengals 23-10. For Cincinnati, Andy Dalton only passed for 180 yards, but he has 2 touchdowns, both of them going to Tyler Eifert. And then Jeremy Hill also has a good game like we all assumed that he would. He gets 142 scrimmage yards and a touchdown, so he's a bright spot this week. And for the Browns, just not a whole lot here to be excited about at all. Crowell had a decent day, but that was about it. It was really hard to watch this team at times today. A wide open touchdown bouncing off your face, and you feel sorry for them at this point. They cannot seem to be getting anything right, and they just continue to lose games. So, I mean, other than we kind of assumed Eifert was going to have a good game and assumed Hill was going to have a good game, and that all kind of happened as it would. Did anything surprise you from this one, Kev?
I think Terrell Pryor only getting 1 catch for 3 yards surprised me. I mean, even though the Browns are as bad as they are, and they look as like a college team, if that, playing against NFL teams, I do think that Pryor has been pretty steady overall, and I think a lot of people were counting on him in this one for at least a wide receiver 2 production. 1 catch for 3 yards isn't going to do it, and I think that really hurt a lot of people. Isaiah Crowell was a nice surprise for them as well. 10 carries for 113 yards. But, unless you had both of them on your team to balance it out, I think some people got screwed there pretty bad, and some people, got lucky with the Crowell. I think going forward with the Browns, if you're in the playoffs, I don't think you can really start too many of these guys. I don't know that you can really depend on even Pryor at this point as more than a flex, maybe, and that's about it. On the other side of the ball, I mean, the game script for this one worked out exactly how we thought it would, right? We thought that Cincinnati would come out, throw a couple of quick touchdowns, and then they'd lean on them with the run the rest of the game, and that's basically what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why Jeremy Hill's stats were as high as they were. That's why Dalton was serviceable with the 2 touchdowns, and that's what you get out of this. Tyler Boyd had a pretty nice day with 6 receptions for 49 yards. So in PPR leagues, he's probably a okay day. And Eifert obviously gets the 2 touchdowns, so that helps his owners. But the low yardage total is kind of what you're going to expect, I think, because he's going to be keyed in on from a defense. So, but he does get to 2 touchdowns, so it really doesn't matter in this one.
Yeah, Tyler Boyd actually also added 2 rushes for 40 yards on top of those receiving yards. So he actually had a really solid day in half-point PPR scoring. He had over 11 points. So pretty nice day for him. Like you were talking about with Crowell, the sucky thing about him is that he's been so bad for the last couple of weeks. I doubt he was in many lineups.
Very true.
For people to pay off with the week that he had, I'm sure Terrell Pryor was in many more lineups and probably hurt many more people. Browns were excited to get RG3 back to see exactly what they had in him, and I think they realized that they'll be drafting in a quarterback again next season, and probably the wrong one.
Yeah,
yet again.
Some reports came out this week that they might be going hard after Jimmy Garoppolo, so that would be interesting.
That would be interesting. I was asked your opinion about that in the FLAFFL chat the other day about what you thought about that, if you would be okay with the Patriots giving up Garoppolo for the amount of draft picks they'd probably get in return.
It depends. It really would depend on the haul, and it's so tough because you look at Jimmy Garoppolo and you think he played well when he was in there. He could be a guy that could be a long-term answer, but he's not Tom Brady, and Tom Brady still has a few more years left in him. It's really a catch-22, right? Do you roll the dice and think you can draft another guy that might end up being as good as Jimmy Garoppolo, as want to take over for Tom, or do you hang on to him and carry the 2 quarterbacks until Tom's ready to go? I personally think take the draft picks and load up for a couple more Super Bowls and see what you can do.
Yeah, I think it comes down to this. Do you think Tom Brady will be deflating any more footballs in the near future?
I don't think that he deflated any footballs to begin with.
Because if not, I don't think you're going to need that backup quarterback. You're not going to have to worry about the suspension. You're not going to have to worry about all that stuff. So,
yeah,
I agree with you. I would think they'd be smart to get the draft picks, and I think it's something that New England would do. It just seems like something that they would totally do. They would ship him away and take their chances.
You look at their history. They traded what, Castle? I think he was a 7th round pick and netted a first round, I think, from Kansas City, or maybe a 2nd round pick at that time. And it's not a bad move when you have a good backup, and there's teams out there looking for those guys. If you don't need them, you might as well move them.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we're going to move on. Lions, they do what they do best. They come back and win in the 4th quarter against the Chicago Bears by a score of 20-17. Matthew Stafford actually gets injured in this game. He dislocates his middle finger, but he stays in. He throws a touchdown to Anquan Bolden and also rushes in another touchdown as they put themselves in great position to win their division now. All of the Lions receivers have decent days, but Bolden getting the touchdown makes him the high scorer there. For the Bears, Jordan Howard has 110 total yards but does not get into the end zone. And for wide receivers, Cameron Meredith does score to go along with 72 receiving yards there. But other than that, it was kind of a quiet game for the offenses here. What did you see in this game that stood out to you, Kev?
It was a boring game. It definitely was. I thought that overall there wasn't a lot to watch in this one. The Lions got the rushing game going a little bit more than they have previously, of course, because I dropped Dwayne Washington this week. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. It makes sense that he got 16 carries for 64 yards. Finally had a 4.0 average at least, first time all year. So that was nice. But no, I mean the Stafford spread the ball around very well, as you mentioned. No receivers stood out because they all got relatively decent catch and yard totals but he spread it around so much. Stafford really wasn't that great either as far as his numbers, 223 with a touchdown and 2 interceptions, so that doesn't help too much. And I mean, Howard has an okay day, but probably didn't really solidify any. It's just a boring game. Most people probably benched Cameron Meredith so at this point because he was so terrible the last few weeks, so he didn't really help too many people, and I don't think there's anything you can take from this game going forward, really. I would be a little concerned with Matt Stafford and that finger because he didn't look great throwing the ball afterwards. So I think, you probably have to take that into consideration going forward in your matchups. If you're still, if you made it through this one with Stafford as your quarterback, you're going to have to look elsewhere, in my opinion, going forward, because it's going to be he might have some struggles with that finger.
Yeah, and I also think that not having Theo Rick there this week, him being inactive, I think surprised a lot of people this morning.
Absolutely.
I know I wasn't expecting it. But although he is a running back, he is a big part of their passing game. Obviously, everyone who plays fantasy knows what an asset he is in PPR leagues because of how much receiving he does out of the backfield. And so I think him not being there today had a little bit to do with that as well. So he showed up on the injury report this week with a wrist injury and, like I said, was inactive for this game. So you want to keep an eye on him going forward as well. I think both are factors that might hurt the value of Stafford going forward. So anything else from this one? This boring game.
Yeah, no, the Lions play the Giants next week anyway. Not a great matchup overall for Stafford either. So as we mentioned, keep an eye on that and see what happens on the Chicago side of the ball. Who does Chicago have? Chicago has the Packers, who've been pretty good against the run lately. So Jordan Howard's the only guy you're probably starting on the Bears, and that's a tough matchup as well. So not a lot to look forward to for these two teams.
Alrighty, then we will move on. The Texans go into Indianapolis and win an important divisional game against the Colts, 22-17. Lamar Miller loves playing the Colts. He gets over 100 yards rushing and a touchdown. Brock Asswasher looked awful yet again, but the defense plays
so
well
bad.
enough. Oh, it's just so ugly. He throws the ball and just puts his hands on his head.
Yeah.
he throws it and just
like an
instantly
instant
knows.
reaction. I think if he threw a touchdown, he'd probably do the same thing just out of habit.
Yeah, it'd be like, oh, oops, this was good. I did good. Yeah, but the defense played well enough and caused a few turnovers from Andrew Luck to get them this win. DeAndre Hopkins held to only 2 catches, so he does not have the huge game that Sal had predicted for him last week, thankfully. For the Colts, Luck does end up with an average fantasy day because of those turnovers. He has 270 yards passing and 2 touchdowns, but 3 turnovers, like I said. Hilton goes over 100 yards and scores another touchdown. Frank Gore, Old Faithful, he scores. And I think the story in this one has got to be Dante Moncrief, the guy that we all proclaim as he scores a touchdown every week. He's the high floor guy. He's the one that, if you need somebody to get you guaranteed points, Dante Moncrief's a pretty good bet for that. Gives everybody a big fat 0. And he actually ends up leaving the game in the fourth quarter with a hamstring injury to add to the list of disappointments for this week. So, Kev, what are you taking away from the Texans-Colts game?
Yeah, the dreaded donut from Moncrief hurt me in a couple of places, and I'm sure hurt plenty of other people. Yeah, the touchdowns you knew were fluky, that you knew they weren't going to last, but he still seemed pretty steady as far as what he was getting. He's getting 4 or 5 catches and 40 to 50 yards, right? So I think you thought that you'd at least be safe with that, even if you didn't catch the touchdown. The 0 certainly hurts. You think it's possible that they should tell Andrew Luck that he's allowed to play in the first half? Because it seems like he doesn't do anything until after halftime.
It probably would be beneficial to the team.
Yeah.
They could win more games, possibly.
I would think it would be a big winning, goal for them or motivation for them to win if he just knew that he could start playing right away instead of waiting for halftime.
He can try it.
Maybe I'll send a letter.
Try.
Maybe I'll send a letter.
That's a good idea.
We'll see what we can do there. Andrew Luck looks terrible in the first half and then comes out and throws 2 touchdowns in the second half, so he at least makes his day a little better. As you said, he still had the 2 picks, so it's not a great day overall. And Frank Gore will finish somewhere in I'm certain RB2 range, as he always does. He gets the touchdown receiving, 2 catches for 33 yards, and then has another 40 on the ground. So not a great day running the ball, but at least he bails you out with the catches and the receiving touchdown. So other than that, T.Y. Hilton's really good at football. He will continue to be really good at football for a while. He got 13 targets in this, 9 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown. That's great. Great day, great production. You started to see a lot of people ask questions this week on the other side of the ball about CJ Fedorowicz, or CJ Fancy Hat, as we refer to him in FLAFFL chat.
Yes.
And The concern was that Ryan Griffin was taking away from targets and really going to steal some of his thunder. I don't think that's the case. You may look at the box score in this one and see 3 for 32 for Fedorowicz, 2 for 23 for Griffin, but the targets really tell a story there. Fedorowicz was targeted 7 times. Griffin only had the 2 targets. So I think the real killer of Fedorowicz is not Ryan Griffin. It's Asswasher. He kills everyone on that team.
Yep, I was just going to ask you, if you survive this week, are you benching Hopkins?
Yes.
Going forward? I mean, we had him ranked pretty high again this week, but I'm done. I'm done with it.
I'm done with him as well. And looking at next week, he's got, who do they have? They have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who surprisingly have been pretty decent against the pass. Yep. So you gotta wonder that. I think I'd bench him. I think it's sad, but I think you have to at this point.
Yep, I would have to agree. All right, we're going to move on to, you thought that Lions game was boring, Minnesota at Jacksonville.
Well, you don't like field goals?
Yeah, the final score to this game, 25-16. And if you owned any of these field goal kickers, then you probably did like this game. You probably enjoyed it very much. If you had any of them on fantasy,
kickers' lives matter, Steve. Kickers' lives matter.
That's true. I'm not going to pretend they don't. That's for sure. TJ Yeldon, he gets 90 yards total, and Blake Bortles didn't turn the ball over. So, I mean, I guess that's positive.
Yep.
For the Vikings, Kyle Rudolph, he has a nice game. He has 60 yards and a touchdown. Adam Thielen gets over 100 yards, so he has a very solid afternoon. But otherwise, this game was pretty boring. Kev, I want to ask, do you think the meeting that Allen Robinson had with Blake Bortles did a lot of good as it translates to one catch for 17 yards on Sunday?
Yeah, because I think what Allen Robinson actually said in the meeting was throw the ball to Marquise Lee. I think that's what he said. Lee
Blake Bortles can listen.
Yeah, Lee gets targeted 8 times, has 5 catches for 113 yards. Meanwhile, Allen Robinson gets 1 catch on 3 targets for 17 yards. Great.
Yeah,
I think this is a tough defense to really figure out whether or not that meeting worked, because I think I'm pretty sure that they bracketed Allen Robinson quite a bit throughout this, and I think he didn't really have a lot of room to work with. But having said that, Bortles is still terrible. I don't care if he didn't turn the ball over this time and he threw 250 and a touchdown. He's still awful. He still had a rating under 100 for regular rating, which is okay, but I don't know. He's not good at football, and
no, not at all.
Surprising that he did as well as he did against this defense, who I think is still a very good defense. But and you look at the 6.9 yards per throw. Completion average is not very good. Overall, he's not a good quarterback, and he's killing Allen Robinson. No one in the receiving core outside of Marquise Lee, who seems to be very relevant, is even worth a flex at this point. I think you gotta, if you're made it through, these are the times. This week it'll be week 15. You just gotta move on.
Yep, absolutely. Blake Bortles. I mean, we were all very low on him coming into the season. We all thought that a pretty big regression was coming for him. But this is like when you go into when you're in school and you take a test and you'd be like, oh, you know what? I think I got a B on this one. And you go and you look and you just got an A+ because you were that right. And you just nailed it that much of how bad Blake Bortles was and how terrible he's been. And we saw it coming. We saw it coming, but I don't know if we thought it was going to be this bad. He is just so bad.
Yeah,
so bad.
I didn't think it was going to be this bad. I really didn't. I got to be honest with you. I thought regression, sure. I thought he'd finish, in the 20s overall, but he's just terrible.
Yeah,
it doesn't get any easier next week against Houston, who obviously showed they have a pretty good defense as well. So if you're somehow using Blake Bortles, stop using Blake Bortles.
Yes, just stop.
Just stop. All right. Now.
I was going to say we're going to stop talking about Blake Bortles.
Yeah, we are, and we should talk about the Vikings because there are some guys on there that are relevant, I guess. Adam Thielen, who I had in my lineup, obviously 16-team league, but had a nice day, 4 catches for 101 yards. He had a long of 41. Kyle Rudolph gets in the end zone again, which is nice. He has 4 catches for 60 yards. For tight end production, that's pretty solid. I think overall those are the 2 guys. Stephon Diggs, he had a light day, only 5 targets, 3 catches for 55 yards. Not what you're looking out of a PPR guy. So tough day there, but I think better days are ahead for him probably, and you can still start him as a flex or a wide receiver too. I
agree there, and continue avoiding the run game.
Agreed.
All right, we move on. The Miami Dolphins pull off somewhat, some would consider an upset. They beat the Arizona Cardinals 26-23 on a last-second field goal, but they were up big early in this one. Arizona came back and tied it up, and then Miami took the lead. This was an odd game. It didn't do much for fantasy teams. Kenny Stills and Deion Sims both score for the Dolphins. Jarvis Landry, he tops 100 yards on only 4 catches, so that was nice. And then Ryan Tannehill, he had a very solid day, but he gets injured in what is feared to be a torn ACL. He will most likely be done for the rest of the season as soon as that is confirmed. David Johnson does what he normally does. He turns in 100-plus yards on yards from scrimmage, does not score a touchdown in this one, and he does turn the ball over with a fumble. But it was J.J. Nelson who has a huge day for the Cardinals. He has a 50-yard rush for a touchdown, and also his only catch scores another touchdown, so that absolutely helps nobody. Just a bad week overall for most of the fantasy players for the Cardinals. Carson Palmer looked bad yet again under pressure almost. It seemed every time he dropped back. Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, John Brown all had just very forgettable days. So anything that you took from this Miami-Arizona game?
I guess, you talk about David Johnson because he's a fantasy stud and he's a guy that carried a lot of people to the playoffs. Tough day for him comparatively, but he still gets 120 plus yards. Just doesn't get in the end zone, which kind of hurts you. But I think we talked about it off air. That means that he's probably going to go off next week. So I think that's good for people if you made it through. And it was funny. There were talks this morning on the NFL Network about him potentially going for the elusive 1,000-yard rushing, 1,000-yard receiving season. I don't think anyone's ever done it in NFL history, so it would be pretty amazing. He'd need some pretty big games going forward, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, which is something that's interesting to me. So J.J. Nelson could have some value going forward. The rushing touchdown was kind of a fluke, but he did have a decent day. He gets the 1 catch in the 8-yard. He gets targeted in the end zone. He has two targets overall. And a bad day for Larry Fitzgerald as well. 9 targets. He only catches the ball 3 times. Like you said, this was a sloppy game. A lot of rain. Carson Palmer was pressured all day long. So just not a good day for that offense. I think they will bounce back. Looking at the schedule, they have the Saints next week, which is a great matchup. They're at home, so that should be a solid matchup for all your offensive players. For the Cardinals, particularly David Johnson, I think you're going to see have a bounce back game. For the Dolphins, it makes sense, right? Tannehill finally became fantasy relevant and then tears his ACL. So it sounds about right. Feel bad for the guy. He had a tough year, and then to end it that way, it's not really what you want. But they did get the win. They are still in playoff contention, so I guess that's a positive. Jay Ajayi, it was a positive. Jay Ajayi is he's struggling at this point. What are you doing with Jay Ajayi?
It's going to be dependent on your roster. It's dependent on the other options that you have because his draft value dropped so much before the season started. There's a chance that you were able to get him off waivers, so you might be able to play some matchups with some other guys. But he still has running back 2 value because of the volume that he gets. That we mentioned last week with the injuries to Miami's offensive line has really hurt his production. But he is still on the field quite a bit. So I think he's still going to be in that running back 2 range, maybe closer to a lower end running back 2 going forward. But he's just a guy that you're going to have to you can probably put in your lineup, but you can play matchups with and just see what other kind of options that you have. But I think he's still a very viable option going forward for sure.
Yep. If Jarvis Landry gets over 100 yards in this one, but only on 4 receptions, which is incredibly weird for him.
Yes.
Kenny Stills gets you the touchdown with 97 yards, and Devontae Parker only has 2 catches. So I don't know what I would be doing with the Miami receiving core in this going forward. I think you probably are still trotting out Landry. Parker's a little bit shakier, and I'm certainly not trusting Kenny Stills. So
Yeah, going forward next week, I would definitely be trying to bench them all to see what that offense is going to look like in different conditions with a full week of the new quarterback and all that kind of stuff. I would be very hesitant to put anybody but a Jai in my lineup for next week.
it's a plus matchup against the Jets, but still not sure you want to risk it. So
I believe that's a Saturday night affair as well.
It
so
is.
We get Saturday night football starting next week. I love it.
that is good.
Love
That is
it,
good.
love it.
I'm sure my wife will be happy.
Oh, they always enjoy it. They enjoy it the most, I've heard.
That's right.
They're just like, wait, it's on another night?
What,
Great.
another whole night?
I'm so happy. Oh, man. All right, we're going to move on. Washington goes to Philadelphia and beats the Eagles to keep their slim playoff hopes alive. They win 27-22. For Washington, Deshaun Jackson, he scores on an 80-yard bomb like he always does. Pierre Garçon scores a touchdown to go along with 59 receiving yards for him. And Rob Kelly rushes for 88 yards and also gets into the end zone, so he has a pretty solid fantasy day as well. All of the Washington fantasy players besides Jordan Reed had a pretty solid day. Also, Jameson Crowder had a very lackluster day, something that he is not used to. And then for Philadelphia, Jordan Matthews, he gets 79 yards on 8 catches. Zach Ertz turns in another good game. He has 10 catches for 113 yards. But Sproles, he gets into the end zone but doesn't have a ton of yards to go with that before he absolutely gets blown up on that punt return play.
That was brutal.
Oh, man, it was rough. That was a tough one to watch. So what are you taking from this Washington-Philly game?
Yeah, I finally praised Jamison Crowder last week and throws out the dud.
Yep.
So, you're welcome, everyone. I'm glad that hopefully I didn't ruin your fantasy matchups too much. Overall, it was nice to see Robert Kelly get 2 catches. I don't think he'd been involved in the passing game at all. So, I know it's only 2 catches, but that's still nice. He didn't have a great day on the ground, but he does get the touchdown, so that helps. So that's nice on that side of the ball. I think Kirk Cousins, 234 and 2 touchdowns probably wasn't as good as you would have hoped against a defense that you think you was a little susceptible to the pass, but overall it's serviceable. I think he almost threw this game away with a terrible pick, but overall he did. They do pull out the victory and keep their playoff hopes alive. Carson Wentz looked better in this one, which is important only for the relevant receiving options that you have in the Philadelphia wide receiving core. I don't think anyone's counting on Carson Wentz for their playoffs, but Zach Ertz looks good, and Jordan Matthews had a decent day here too. Neither of them get in the end zone, but I think overall those are guys you're going to be trusting. As Zach Ertz is probably a top 6 or 7 tight end at this point, the rest of the way. Jordan Matthews is going to be in your wide receiver 2 consideration next week as well. So those are guys you can definitely keep an eye on. If you lost Darren Sproles today and he's a guy that you're counting on, Smallwood's the guy you probably want to pick up, but definitely keep an eye on it. See if Sproles is okay. He did take a huge shot. So
I was going to say, I actually think that Smallwood got knocked out of the game as well. So I think that, oddly enough, Ryan Matthews is the only running back that survived this week for Philadelphia.
Of course. Makes sense.
Yep, I would take a look to see if you could see if, he had a few weeks of low production, and so he might be available out there on waivers. So I would definitely take a look for that. I was going to ask you, Kev, is this what Zach Ertz does? It seems like every year, towards the end of the season, he has 3 or 4 big games that gets everybody excited, and then the season starts, and it takes him 12 weeks to warm up, and then he starts it over again. Then he has 3 to 4 good weeks to end the year, and then people get excited about him, and then he sucks for 12 weeks, and then starts to do good again.
Yeah,
what's up?
Maybe I will send a letter to him in the training camp next year and tell him when the season starts.
There we go.
Just like with Andrew Luck, I'll send him, saying he can play in the first half, and then. I'll send,
that's right.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot of writing to do. Also, don't skimp on the stamps or the envelopes.
No, you got it. Definitely, we'll make sure they are properly posted, and they will be in secure envelopes.
Okay, we're moving on.
All right.
Trevor Siemian back starting at quarterback for the Denver Broncos, and that translated to 10 whole points. And for Denver, that was not enough for them to win their game against the Titans and keep pace, keep pace in the playoff race. Although they did hold their spot, oddly enough, they lose to Tennessee and by a score of 13-10. Demaryius Thomas, he has a solid day, 10 catches and over 100 yards. But Emmanuel Sanders is the one that gets the touchdown to go with his 100 yards. Newcomer Justin Forsett out-touches Devontae Booker, which I think should be sending up some red flags because, he was just signed on Wednesday. Although Booker did lead the backfield in snaps, it was Justin Forsett that did end up getting more touches. So that could be something that's game flow dependent, but being that it already happened, I would definitely be paying attention to that going forward. For the Titans, it's DeMarco Murray who gets into the end zone, but Derrick Henry did end up getting 12 carries today and got a few goal line looks as well, so be on the lookout for that. He's definitely in the mix. But otherwise, this was also a kind of boring game. So what are you looking to take away from this one, Kev?
Yeah, there was boring football on all over the place today, and your Broncos definitely added to that. I thought when I first pulled up the box score for this game, I thought I had scrolled too far and was looking at the rushing totals for Marcus Mariota. Turns out it was actually the passing totals because not a good day for him throwing the ball, huh?
No, not at all.
Mariota was a guy that a lot of people were very high on. He had a lot of solid production coming in, and this was just an absolute brutal one for him. So hopefully, maybe you survived. 88 yards. He threw the ball for 88 yards. Hopefully you didn't play him because it's, obviously the Denver defense, we all know about how good they are and how legit they are. So hopefully you didn't play him. But if you did, I apologize. He did not make it through. Excuse me. DeMarco Murray looks good in this game, as usual. Not a lot to take from this game, to be honest with you. I mean, Siemian threw the ball okay. He only gets the one touchdown. You tell me, Steve, what happened? Were they just not good in the red zone? Could they not convert? What was going on?
Yeah, I mean, they weren't getting it done. They had a turnover, obviously, the last play of the game. They're driving to try and get in field goal range to tie this one up. In their newly acquired tight end, or I guess he's not that newly acquired, but the tight end that they got from the Patriots ends up fumbling, and they'd gone for it a couple times on fourth down, ended up not converting. Devontae Booker just had an absolutely terrible day rushing the ball, so they couldn't get that going at all. I mean, you had Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas both have over 100 yards receiving, so they were able to move the ball. They just could not get it into the end zone. They couldn't pay off at the end of any other drives. So very disappointing. It was a game that I thought that they had a really good chance of winning. I was excited that Siemian was back because Paxton Lynch didn't look great against Jacksonville, and they stunk it up. And lucky to hold on to that 6th seed in the playoffs right now. So it'll be interesting to see how they look going forward. Their offense is in a real scary spot right now.
Yeah, not good. So what are you doing with these guys going forward? You obviously Thomas and Sanders had good days, anyway. So you're rolling them out. I don't think you can trust Booker if you did manage to get through this week with him. I don't know. You got to be weary about rolling him out there next week, particularly with Forsett getting the amount of work that he did. And on the Tennessee side of the ball, I think you're all set. With the guys that got you there. I think they're going to be fine. They'll bounce back. Murray still had a good day. I'm not super worried about the carries that Henry got because Murray was still productive. Delaney Walker had a tough day, but he will bounce back because he's Delaney Walker and he's pretty consistent. And Rashard Matthews, I think, on a day where Mariota only throws 88 yards, what do you expect? But that shouldn't happen again. So.
Yep, I would agree with you there. We're going to move on. In one of the most exhilarating games of the day, the Jets beat the 49ers in overtime to give the 49ers their 12th straight loss by a score of 23-17. Another sad story here. Matt Forte exits this game on the Jets' second series. He leaves with a knee injury. So if you happen to own him and Melvin Gordon on the same team and started them both like I did in most of my leagues, then you lost like I did in most of my leagues. But luckily, if you have Bilal Powell, he stepped in and he had a huge game. He rushes for 145 yards on 29 carries and scores 2 touchdowns. And he also adds 34 yards on 5 catches as well. For the 49ers, Carlos Hyde reminds us that he is not dead. He goes off for 193 yards, 200 total yards, and a receiving touchdown, but he was really all there was to be excited about for the 49ers. So, Kev, what are you taking from this game?
Do I have to take anything?
No, you are not required to take a damn thing.
Right, I'd probably take nothing from this. I mean, Carlos Hyde is not going to run for 193 yards next week. I doubt. I'm gonna say that fairly confidently that he's not going to.
Yep.
I don't think that anyone now is relying on Colin Kaepernick, although we thought he might have a good game in this. I think this game pretty much solidifies him as back to your bench and don't trust him for playoffs. And I mean, I think the big story here is going to be Matt Forte, and we're keeping an eye on what his injury is, because if you have him, you're probably counting on him for solid running back 2 production, and we have to see what the injury news is. Interesting again that Robbie Anderson has another nice day with Bryce Petty at quarterback, 6 for 99. He's a guy that if you're looking for a flex option next week, he might be one to target. Just because, this guy obviously likes throwing the ball to him. Brandon Marshall has basically been relegated to backup duty at this point. 3 catches for 33 yards. Quincy Enunwa is kind of irrelevant in this game as well. Clearly, Petty has a relationship with Robbie Anderson, and he's gonna target him. So, I mean, I think if you're looking to replace Brandon Marshall, you might want to go with Robbie Anderson. I can't believe those words just came out of my mouth. But, yeah, that's it. I mean,
Yep.
not much else.
Yep, I would agree. You kind of know what the 49ers are at this point. Carlos Hyde really the only weekly usable piece there. And then if Matt Forte's injury is going to be enough to keep him out this next week, definitely check to make sure Bilal Powell's not available on waivers, because he would be a definite add. And, I'd feel comfortable starting him instantly, knowing if Forte were out. And then, yeah, I like that you brought up Robbie Anderson, because he's had solid game 2 weeks in a row now. So not too much else there. We are going to move on. The Bucks, man, they are for real. I know the Saints aren't the best team in the world, but still, Drew Brees, Mark Ingram, Brandon Cooks, they aren't terrible either. But the Bucks are legit, and they beat New Orleans 16-11, kind of a weird score for a football game. Doug Martin gets the only touchdown that was scored in this game, so those hoping for a huge game from Jameis Winston and Mike Evans and Drew Brees and Brandon Cooks, they were all disappointed, especially Drew Brees owners. Turns in his second dud in as many weeks. Willie Snead has 85 yards, which is the most yards earned by any player in this game. So much like we joked about last week, this game ended up being a flop after being talked about and hyped up for all season long for this great playoff matchup. I think for the Bucks, we can assume that they'll all probably be on track next week. But, Kev, what do you think about the Saints going forward? Are they becoming harder to trust for you from a fantasy standpoint?
Yeah, it's harder to trust, but I don't know. I'm careful because we said this last week. Said, no, Drew Brees will not have a game like that again. And then he goes out and throws another 3 picks with no touchdowns. That's 6.
Literally has the same game again.
Literally has the same game again, actually with less yards. So he was less productive in this game than he was last week. So that's awful. I'm gonna double down and say he won't do it again because this team is just too good offensively. They do travel. What do we say? We travel on the road, so not great when they leave the dome. But if you watch this game at all, Drew Brees had 2 touchdowns that were dropped. So it could have been a much better day for Drew Brees. Brandon Cooks dropped a touchdown in the end zone, and Travaris Cadet did as well. So two bad drops on in inconvenient times for him. And, you'd think those are 2 touchdowns that he could have had that would have made this day much, much better. So overall, look, like I said, I'm doubling down on Drew Brees and this offense. I think they'll be fine. And I think if you can make it through next week with them, you still have that Week 16 matchup against the Bucs in the Dome, right? That should be where it all turns around, right?
Yep.
Right,
yep.
Steve? Right?
Yeah.
Asking for a friend here.
Yes, you'd absolutely hope so. I would like to throw in there that also just coming activated on Saturday, Charles Sims comes in. He does get 4 rushes for only 17 yards, but he also does add 3 catches for 33 yards. So in a PPR format, he's a guy that you want to make sure you can scoop up. He's only owned in 12% of leagues right now. So a piece of an offense that gets utilized each and every week is an important player to have, I think. So I think you should be looking to see if he is available. Do you have anything else from this game before we move along?
No, I completely agree with you on that one. I think that Charles Sims getting his feet wet in this one, he should be even more involved going forward. Doug Martin gets a ton of carries again and still doesn't get a lot of yards, but at least he gets you the touchdown. So this team is what it is going forward, so keep rolling them out there.
All right, then we move on. The Seahawks, man, they suck. They suck so bad. I mean, I know the Packers are a good team, and Lambeau is a tough place to play, but Russell Wilson sucks, and the offensive line sucks, and the defense without Earl Thomas, it sucks. And they just suck, and I don't like them. And they got their asses beat by the Packers today, 38-10. Russell Wilson, Kev, you pointed this out in our Falafel chat on Twitter, that he's single-handedly trying to ruin me in Falafel.
Yeah,
he's doing
trying
everything
to take your
he
team
can.
down. He's trying.
And it is rude. I don't appreciate it.
It's like a personal vendetta.
Yeah.
I don't know what you did to him.
I've never even met him.
You must have. You must have done something. Did you pee in his Cheerios?
You know what? I peed in so many Cheerios. It's kind of hard to tell right now. So, but I'm not going to let it happen. I don't know if we've been over this, but I've won my game in Falafel already this week.
Yes.
So I've survived relegation for one more week. Yeah, I've not been relegated yet. So
the real question, Steve, will you start him or Kirk Cousins next week?
I'm starting Kirk Cousins next week. I'm starting Kirk Cousins against Carolina, and it's not even a question. I will have Kirk Cousins ranked higher than Russell Wilson because I think that Russell Wilson, he had those 3 games, got everybody excited again, and that offense is just, they have no identity. They have no idea who they are, and they suck.
You saw what Matt Ryan did to the Rams today, though, right? We'll get to that in a second, obviously, but you saw how bad that defense was, and you're not going to roll Russ Wilson out there?
I saw what Russell Wilson did against the Rams earlier this season when he scored 11.6 points. And no, I have zero faith that he's going to do anything better. And if he does, he can do it on my bench because I don't trust him. In that game in particular, the Rams and the Seahawks is one of the weirdest dynamics you'll ever see in football, the way that those two teams play each other.
Very true.
And that's when Seahawks are going good. They still play them tough. Now they're playing like garbage. And so, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams won this game again. They already won the meeting earlier in the season. So, absolutely not. I'm not starting Russell Wilson. I hate him.
All right. So, other interesting points about this game. Thomas Rawls ran the ball pretty well. He had 12 carries for 67 yards. It's a 5.6 average. Obviously, the game script in this one, it got out of control pretty quickly for the Seahawks, so they had to kind of abandon the run a little bit. Forcing Russell Wilson to throw 39 terrible passes. I think overall, with the receiving core, you didn't really see anything that was worth it on this one. Baldwin let you down. Lockett, if you coming off the big week last week, let you down. Neither of them break 50 yards. Tanner McAvoy somehow gets the touchdown. It was a really nice catch, by the way. But I mean, I don't know anyone that even has Tanner McAvoy on their roster. Sal would probably say he has him on his 32-team league, but that's about it. Jimmy Graham lets you down with only 1 catch on 4 targets in this one. They just couldn't do anything at all. On the other side of the ball, the complete opposite. Aaron Rodgers, very efficient, 18 for 23 for 246 and 3 touchdowns. Has a good day there. Ty Montgomery has a great day on the ground, 9 rushes for 41 yards and a touchdown. And he also gets 3 catches for 45 yards. So very productive for Montgomery on most people's bench, I'm sure, because he had not been productive at all. The interesting story for me on that side of the ball, Kristen Michael against his old team, 10 carries for 36 yards. Didn't look great running the ball against a very tough Seattle defense, but he got the 10 carries, which is nice. So if he's someone that you might have picked up, I don't know that you're going to use him. I don't know that I trust him in my playoff matchup, although I might have to in a 16-team league next week. So, Devontae Adams continues to roll. 4 catches, 104 yards, and a touchdown. And Jordy Nelson gets two touchdowns in this, although his yardage total is a little lower. So, I think we talked about it, Steve, but truthfully, beside your hatred for him, do you think that they can bounce back at home against LA next week? Because there are a lot of people that have to count on Seattle next week. So what do you think?
I think that, given that Russell Wilson, the type of player that he is, people might not have other options. You could do a lot worse than starting Russell Wilson against the Rams. You really can. But I'm not just being a jerk when I say that these Rams-Seahawks matchups are different. They don't. You can look at the splits. I don't have them right in front of me, but I would be surprised if Russell Wilson wasn't, noticeably statistically worse again in these games when he does play the Rams. I know he's had a couple blowouts against them, but for the most part, they play them very tough. It's just they match up with each other so well that it's not a good matchup for him. So, a guy like Doug Baldwin, I think you're going to have in there every week. He's that type of player where you usually have to use him. But a guy like Russell Wilson, you're going to have him in there. But if you have a better option, I wouldn't have an issue benching him. So, and then a guy like Thomas Rawls, you saw what the Atlanta running backs were able to do against the Rams. So I would probably be starting a guy like him as well. The position players are there. They are all skillful and they all have talent. And that's what's so frustrating about it, is that we've seen Russell Wilson, how good he can be for the last few years. And so you trust that talent, and to have him continuously come out and be crap week after week after week is where half the frustration comes from for me.
Yeah, understood there. And I'm looking right now at Russell Wilson's splits. It looks like against his averages against the Rams, 20 for 29, 230 yards, 1 touchdown, and 0.7 interceptions are his averages. So not great numbers there. So I guess you are correct.
It's good to hear. We're going to move on before you have any time to take that back. All right, so no Julio, no problems for the Atlanta Falcons. They travel to LA and easily beat the Rams 42-14. This game started with Atlanta kicking the ball off, the Rams fumbling the kickoff, and then one play later, Atlanta's winning 7-0, and they never looked back. Matt Ryan, he still passes for over 225 yards and 3 touchdowns with no Julio Jones. Taylor Gabriel, he catches a huge touchdown for 80 yards. Or 75 yards. It was a big touchdown. So for anyone who swapped him in over Julio, there you go. You were bailed out with that. Tevin Coleman, he totals only 55 yards, but scores 2 touchdowns, much to the chagrin of Devontae Freeman owners. And then for the Rams, Todd Gurley finally has a better than decent game. He gets 88 yards total and then gets into the end zone and scores a touchdown for those who stuck by him. And then for the receivers, not a very great day passing for Jared Goff. He does get a rushing touchdown, so not too much on the Rams side of the ball here. And then the Falcons kind of just did what the Falcons did. I know Kev was huge on the Atlanta defense this week, and they came out pretty huge.
Yeah, the Atlanta defense is the reason you can stream defenses, right? That's what you wait for is matchups like this, and you play the matchups and you look at what's coming up on your schedule. I grabbed them in a few leagues. Luckily, 30 points, I think, in most of the leagues, most formats, they got you 30 points. So you definitely can be excited about that when you're streaming defenses. That was great to see. I thought it was very disappointing to see what happened to Devonta Freeman. Just basically disappeared completely in this one. Obviously, the Falcons didn't need him too much, but he didn't even rush the ball that many times. 6 carries, 6 yards. Not really involved in the passing game as much. 2 for 12, only 3 targets. As you said, Tevin Coleman was kind of the show in this one. I think it was more game script than anything else. So if you manage to get away with it, I think you'll be fine rolling Freeman out there next week. But definitely concerning and probably killed a lot of fantasy owners there. Matt Ryan has a good day with 3 touchdowns, so that helps. Taylor Gabriel, it was a 64-yard reception and
there touchdown.
We go. Very nice play. Again, the guy's only gets 6 targets, 3 catches, but he gets 82 yards and a touchdown. He's a burner. I think this is just the type of thing that really, really sucks for fantasy when you lose a guy like Julio Jones to a game time decision and then he's out. The news that he was out came out fairly early, but it was still into the games for the 1 o'clock games, and that's the worst, right? Because you have the 4:30 start, and then you have to make the decision before you know.
Yep.
Luckily, hopefully a lot of people benched him and went with someone else, and maybe they made it through. So, your boy Gurley got you a touchdown today.
That he did. I thought he was going to have a pretty good game, and he came through. So, yeah, I was very happy to see that. And, with my win in Falafel, and hopefully I am able to stave off relegation, and I will be very happy to keep Todd Gurley for next season. I think he's going to be just fine.
I think he will be as well. I don't think there's anyone else that too many people are counting on. Britt has a decent day with 7 for 82, so 12 targets led the way in this one. They were behind the whole game, so they were throwing a lot, and I think you can expect that going forward. So Tavon Austin showed up again in this one. I don't know if anyone's trusting him. I actually started him in a playoff matchup because my wide receivers are just awful, but and it worked out. He had 7 catches for 62 yards, but I don't know that you're going to use him going forward. So, as we mentioned, they take on the Seahawks. Should be a defensive battle. I don't expect Jared Goff to do a ton against the Seahawks defense, so temper your expectations.
Yes, temper those already low expectations. All right, that's it for the game review. So I'm just going to jump right into my final thought. Please, everybody, if you've got a FLAFFL Festivus grievance that you want to be heard on the podcast, make sure you send it in to falafelhouse@gmail.com. Remember, all the best ones will be aired during the FLAFFL Festivus episode. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter, do that at Falafel House. You can find our page on Facebook and just search Falafel House there. You can find us on Instagram. Of course, you can find the Falafel House chat on the Fantasy Life app. And, of course, check out falafelhouse.com. You can find all kinds of daily fantasy articles, betting articles, DraftKings, all that kind of stuff. Go and check it out. Kev.
I just want to thank everyone for listening. Usually Steve does that, but apparently he's not very thankful today.
Oh, yeah. Usually I do.
Yeah.
Maybe I just don't think anyone's listening.
Well, that's possible. Without Sal, most people turn it off, I'm sure. So anyway, I want to thank everyone for listening. We missed Sal tonight. He should be back with us on Tuesday night when we record you a new episode. It'll probably come out Wednesday for most of you. So until that time, we love reviews. You should leave one on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. And we will try to do better next time with Sal. Until then, Steve, hit the button.